Hey YouTube, Stretch Line Bait and Tackle, aka Old Man and Kayak, and I'm gonna cover. I'm about midway through the tournament series for 2025. I've been fishing the Texas Bassmaster Kayak Division and the North Texas Kayak Association series, and this is my first year tournament fishing, and there's been mistakes made, lessons learned, and hopefully improvement showing throughout the year. It's been a very tough start for me. It's part of it's me, part of it's the weather. I'm not going to blame it all on the weather because other people were catching fish, and sometimes I didn't, and sometimes I did. And I want to go over some of the mistakes that I've made and the lessons that I've learned so far up to date. And this is the midway point through the year, and then I'll do another cap at the end of the year, and hopefully it'll be a much improvement. I'm trying to make the top 50 to make the championship. Before we can go to nationals. So I'm not expecting to go to nationals, but I would like to make the top 50 in our division and be able to go to the playoff or the fish off. So, okay, well, I'm going to start off with the very first tournament was at Lake Palestine. And I did a lot of research ahead and had my site planned out where I was going to fish, how I was going to fish, what I was going to do. And the 4 days, maybe 4 or 5 days prior to the tournament, we had a massive cold front hit. I mean, not quite single digits, but it was 10s and 12s. So it was super cold, really cold. Now, leading up to the 4 days before the tournament, where I was going to put it at the Nasus River, where it comes into Lake Palestine, the bass were already starting to move up and get ready. They were starting to get in the pre-spawn stages. They were feeding up. They were chasing bait fish and getting ready because water temperature was about 52 degrees. Well, we had that 4 days of cold front, and when I got down there, I had my game plan. I went down there. I launched. It was 25 degrees that morning, and the water temperature was 37 degrees. And I moved up. I fished up the river and up into the main part of the lake, and the fish were just gone. I mean, literally gone. Nobody was catching anything that put in at that point. Everybody was the cold front was so intense that it pushed the bass all the way back to the lake, and they just pretty much sank to the bottom and sat, and were just it just reset them on that spawn. And so the error that I made, excuse me, was I had a game plan, and I stubbornly refused to change my game plan once I saw the conditions had changed. And that was a mistake that's 100% on me. When I got in the water and I saw it was 37 degrees, I should have got out and moved around to the main part of the lake, and where it was a little deeper water and there was maybe some warmer temps. And I didn't do that, and so I pretty much skunked out there. Okay, now after that little lesson learned at Lake Palestine, my next tournament was at Lake Dunlap down on the Guadalupe River there in New Braunfels, and this was more my type of fishing. The weather was nice. It's a long linear lake. It's just a dammed up section of the river, so it's kind of like a river. It fishes like a river, and that's I usually do pretty good in those situations. And so I got there, and well, I fished. When I put in, everybody, there was only 2 launch spots, and everybody pretty much headed south up the river. Actually, it was north up to the river, and I fished down towards the dam. There's only like 2 or 3 of us, so I fished every dock pier, lay down, everything, all the way up to the dam, circled around, and man, I was getting skunked, absolutely nothing. And I found this one little cove that was maybe 50 yards square, and I caught one, and my first keeper. And so I started to move on, and I said, well, wait a second, let me continue to fish here. So I did, and I caught another. And then I caught another, and that one got off. It was another keeper. And then I got another one, and I hooked into one that was an absolute monster. I mean, she hit the surface with the mouth wide open, and it was, I mean, this is a bucket mouse. This was a very, very large bass. And I'm bringing her towards the boat, and she's fighting hard in a long, strong pull. Man, it was a big fish. And bap, line snapped. And I have 30-pound braid on. And at first I'm thinking, like, what happened? And then the realization hit me of the mistake that I'd made, of where I had got hung on a cast in a low hanging branch, and I had to go over there, and I had to literally break the branches out to get my braid untangled, and I'm pretty sure it was nicked. And in my haste to fish that spot while it was hot, I kept fishing instead of taking a minute to cut that line, retie, because it doesn't take me long to retie, but I didn't do it. And that's why I lost that fish. That's why that braid broke. It was because I had gotten it caught up in a low-hanging limb, and I didn't take the time to do what needed to be done. So that mistake was on me. But anyway, I didn't do too bad at that tournament. I finished a 19th. If I could have landed one more fish, I don't know how big that one that I lost was. She was big, and I would be guessing 20 inches, and it would have been enough to put me from 19th up into the top 10. But I still ended up in 19th place, so I wasn't too upset about that. I mean, I was upset about losing the fish. We always are when we lose a big one. But anyway, hey, another lesson learned. All right, now my third stop on the tour was at Caddo Lake. And now this is a body of water I've always wanted to fish. Always, and I've never made it out there. And it's a big, swampy lake, and there's a lot of fish in there. And, man, I go out there with a game plan, and I went out there and practiced the day before, and we had rain and thunderstorms move through, and it rained all day and all that night, and off and on the next morning of the tournament. So, anyway, I got out, and there was a lot of us fishing there. We had, I want to think, over 80 boats in the lake for that tournament. And so it was a pretty good sized tournament. And I'm fishing the same areas that everybody else is. And the only thing I'm catching is pickerel. And I caught like 7 or 8 pickerel. I could not land a bass one. And I don't know. I don't fully understand exactly what I was doing wrong at that tournament. I've tried to rethink it and see, what did I do wrong? What was I? And the only thing I can think of is this is a very shallow lake. I mean, the deepest spot of water I found was 6 foot, and most of the spots I was fishing was 2 to 3 feet, and so I was fishing some. I fished a few little spinner baits, and I did some topwater frog and some stuff like that, and I kept catching the pickerel, but not any bass, and I don't understand, because I covered a lot of water and a lot of area. When I catch the pickerel, I would move to another area. I think, like, okay, well, let me go find another area. And I just wasn't catching them. And the only thing I can think of is now, and I wasn't thinking at the time, but it's a shallow lake. And I had my electronics on. And out of habit, I had them on. And I'm wondering if in that shallow water, the electronics being on could have alerted the fish. And that's just a theory of mine. And then talking to a couple of gentlemen that I met, a father and son that fished. As a matter of fact, the son had got first place at Dunlap the week before. Real nice couple of dudes. And so, anyway, we got to talk in length. And the fish that they were finding was, the lake is so shallow that when there's a water level change, you're not looking for feet, you're looking for inches. And sometimes a 2 to 3 inch dip is all it took to hold a fish there. And so I guess in that shallow lake, I need to learn that I probably should have left my electronics off. And then when they were on, I should have looked for maybe those little micro changes. And I was looking for big changes, and I wasn't seeing them. So as far as channels and stuff, and some of the channels there are literally less than 6 inches deep. So a 6 inch difference. So that was a lesson learned from Caddo Lake, and I think I'm going to be better prepared for that one next year. All right, my next stop was Possum Kingdom Lake, and I fished this lake before. It's been 20 years, and the river system, the Brazos River, and been up in that area quite a bit. But the day we got out there, lo and behold, another cold front moved in, and this one, when I launched, the air temperature was 37 degrees, but there was a good stiff 15-mile-an-hour plus wind, and so I had to fight the wind, and the water temperature wasn't too bad. And man, I worked and worked and worked and worked and worked that lake in the place where I'd put in, and was catching nothing. And other people I was fishing with, nobody was catching more than one. So I decided, all right, I went loaded up my kayak. I moved around to the other side of the lake, the main body of water, and got out there and fished. And about this time, the wind died down a little bit. It got down below 10 miles an hour, and the sun started coming out, and I caught one 7-inch bass. But I got one, and that, of course, I only had like 2 hours left at the end of the tournament, and then I was pretty much skunked out for the day, and so that was a rough one. And so, at PK, the only thing is, the lessons learned was I need to get better at fishing when there's weather changes and knowing where the fish are and where they've moved to. I need to be smarter that way. And so that's something I'm going to have to research on my own and do a little more work on. And then I did one thing right, which I did move, but I think I covered way too much water and way too much time before I decided to move. And so that was a lesson learned on that tournament there. Now, the last tournament, the midpoint, this is just the midpoint of the season, was at Lake Brownwood. And that is an underappreciated lake. There are some monsters in that lake. There are a lot of big bass. The winner in the kayak division last year ended up catching a 26-inch bass and a monster. And there were some big bags. As a matter of fact, the winner this year won with a 98 inches for 5 fish. And that's a really strong bag. That was a nice, and your top 5 were all high 80 to mid 90 inches in their bags. Now, I caught 2 sand bass and a drum. Wrong species again. And my mistake was I put in at the wrong part of the lake. Now, it wasn't a cold day. The water temperature was warm, but it was windy. And then by 11 or 12 o'clock, probably about 11, it really started getting windy. I guess maybe about 10 o'clock the wind picked up, and it was 17, 18 miles an hour, and that's tough fishing in a kayak. And I had put in at the north end of the lake where the river comes in, and thinking that the bass, because of water temperature, should have been staging. And I was kind of stoked because my very first cast, as soon as the lure hit the water, bam, I locked into a fish at first cast right at 6:30 in the morning. And it was a big old sand bass. I mean, it was a large sand bass. Surprised me how big it was, but wrong species. So anyway, I kept fishing, and I caught another sand bass. And then I started moving up the river where I was going to go. And all I found in the river were gar. Literally hundreds of gar splashing in the shallows, flopping around. I don't know if they were spawning or what, but it's been my experience in the past that when the gar are active like that, the bass aren't. So I left the river and moved up into the main part of the lake, and I moved up and started fishing some coves and stuff like that, and that's where I caught the big drum, big old fat drum. I thought I had a nice bass, but anyway, I worked all that, and nobody was catching anything. And so I said, all right, I'm going to move. So I went and I loaded up my kayak. I thought, well, maybe if I move over to the main part of the lake on the other side, maybe I can find a sheltered zone. And I went to the other ramp, and kayaks were pulling out because of the wind. I mean, here it is like 11:30 in the morning, and people were already leaving the water, and big boats, bass boats, were coming in off the water because it was getting that wavy out there. It was white capping. And now the gentlemen, or the people that were catching the fish, from what I gather, is they caught them early before the winds picked up, and they were in a better part of the lake than me. I had gambled on the shallows where the river comes in, thinking the bass were getting ready to spawn because the water temperature was up in the 60s, mid 60s or so. And so I thought they should have been getting a pre-spawn, but apparently they were still feeding off in the main part of the lake. And that was the other thing is I wasn't finding any bait balls where I was at, and I think that was the key. So I should have been up where the bait fish were and not where the gar were spawning. So anyway, that was my other lessons learned, and it's been a tough year. And I've had one good finish and skunked a bunch of times, and I'm not going to blame it on the weather. I'm going to blame it on poor choices on my part. But lesson learned. Hopefully, I'm usually a type of man that I'll make a mistake, and I usually won't make that mistake a second time. I'm pretty good about learning from my mistakes, and I say this is my first year in tournament season. So hopefully this second half is going to turn out much better. I got an off weekend this weekend, so I'm going to go through my gear. I got a couple rods to restring and put my game plan together, and this one's going to be at Lake Amon Carter, which is a lot closer to home, and it's going to be nice. So hopefully I'll get up there, and right now it's a little far out, but they're showing chance of thunderstorms that day, so we'll see. But as long as there's not a lot of wind, I can do all right in the rain, but we'll see. The weather's been tough this year for us here in Texas, especially on tournament days, but I need to be a better, smarter fisherman, a better basser man, a better planner, and just hope my second season goes up. If I can get one or two more decent finishes up in the top 20, I should qualify at the end of the year for the top 50, because I'm fishing every single tournament, and I just need one or two more good placements, and I should squeak in. And that's my goal this year on my first year, is just to make the playoffs and finish in the top 50, so that's a good game plan. So all right, hey, well everybody, I'm going to cut this short. It's already going a little long. I'm going to cut it to the end. But anyway, I want to remind everybody, hey, wear your PFD. Stay safe out on the water. Go out there, have a good time, but make sure you make it back so you can go do it again. And remember to pick up your trash, pick up other people's trash when you see it, and yak all that trash out, all right? Everybody have a great day.